I try, like I go to work every day. So I go to the studio every day. Some days it just doesn't work. Some days it just does not work at all. Like some days my brain will not be working at all, and then other days it will work, but I need to show up every day.
That was Scott Mellor, aka Loston. Scott is a graphic artist, a musician, and runs his own design studio called the Studio Thinktank, where he has worked with some of the biggest names in the world, including Labrinth, Cardi, and Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine and Audioslave. Scott is based in Perth, Australia, and I first stumbled upon his work as a musician, only to later find out that he had more than one creative facades. So having a chat with him for an episode for the show was the only natural way to feed my curiosity to understand how he works as a multidisciplinary creative, as well as building his own business around his interests. We dug deep on his creative process, how he tackles his many creative acts all at the same time, and his personal journey. Now, for those of you who are new to the podcast, thank you for listening in. Do make sure to check out the YouTube's video version of it. And if you're already watching it on YouTube, do leave a thumbs up on the video and maybe even a comment. It helps the channel out a lot. Alright, without further ado, here is Season 2, Episode 9 of The State of the Creators, featuring Scott Mellor, aka Loston. Hope you enjoy the show. This is The State of the Creators, a show about creative individuals who are on a quest to build something out of nothing. It's funny, this conversation, because with you particularly, because with my guests on the podcast, I usually have either done something with them in the past, either project or something, or have known them through some areas of work. It's probably one of the first few ones where we've spoken on Instagram, and I followed your work on Spotify and things like that, but I've not really known you per se through work or through networking events or coffee chats. So this is an interesting thing for me, because I'm also getting to know you as a creative, but also showing it to the world, to my audience at the same time. So for those who don't know, including myself, who is Scott Mellor?
The existential question.
and we go down that rabbit hole.
That's it. It's interesting though, you just said about like the fact that we've never met before, and that this is it makes it more of a real conversation, because we're not rehashing any information about each other. You know what I mean?
Whatever comes out.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm aware of your creator stuff, the stuff that I'd looked at was saying about the video with your daughter and things like that, and I was totally impressed by that. And then I actually watched some of the Matsu stuff.
Yes.
And then I was like, man, that seems like a really cool podcast. And I was like, I've definitely spoken to that guy before, because we spoke a while ago, right?
Yes, a long time ago.
Yeah, and I saw that podcast. For some reason, it popped up in my thing when I hit you up, which was only a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
So yeah, it's interesting the way the world works.
It is.
It's also interesting how terrible my memory is over time, where it's just become awful. Because I was like, I definitely spoke to that person. I went back through my messages and I was like, okay, cool. But yeah, just to digress away from that, I am a graphic designer by trade, I suppose.
Because you're in your own studio as well.
Yeah. I run a studio called Studio Thinktank, and we do a lot of work with bands and musicians and companies and clothing labels and things like that, all over the world. So I've done that for my whole career, essentially. So that's been the stable, consistent thing, and it's been working for myself.
Right.
But I've always been a musician to some degree. So I started playing in bands, as I said before, when I was younger, and we did a bit of touring and some festivals and things like that. And when it came into my sort of early adult life of being, early 20s, early to mid 20s, I was just working random jobs at retail and things like that. And we couldn't afford to pay anyone to create flyers or merch or anything like that for us. So, and back then it was a lot of postering.
Yeah.
because there wasn't social media.
Yeah.
So I started doing a lot of
print.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. Just because I figured out how to use Photoshop.
Right.
And then that led to me being able to be essentially other bands in the area at the time were like, oh, your posters look good. So I did the posters for them. And then that ended up meaning that I could essentially start a graphic design company, which is a bit of a joke really, so that I could continue playing music and I didn't have to get a job.
Right.
But that ended up becoming the career.
Yeah.
And then that actually gave me enough of an income to return to music later in life and be able to do it when most people wouldn't have at the time.
So because under the name Loston, you still you're producing stuff under the stage name. So that is would you say your side project, or would you say that's becoming more of your thing day by day?
It's an interesting one from like an existential point, really, because I don't have a personal Instagram. People have so I have the Loston Instagram, and then I have one for the design studio as well. So I think as far as my sort of identity is concerned, I like to be a person that does a lot of things. Or maybe I don't like to be a person that does a lot of things, but I am a person that does a lot of things. So I've never really been too tied to just being defined by the one thing.
Oh man, I can relate.
Yeah, and I think, and then I also kind of hate the idea of the creative. Like I don't like.
It's not part of the narrative questions I've written, but do you ever feel that if you go too deep into one side of your creative work, you feel the need to pull out of it just because you don't get labeled as that? Like, okay, I'm gonna be labeled as a designer forever for my life, and I don't want to be. Even though I love what I'm doing, or just a musician, like do you then pull yourself out of it a little bit and then focus on other things?
I don't know that I do it for those reasons. I do. I care more. I think that I care more about who I want to be more than how I'm perceived. But at the same time, that's probably. I mean, there's a lot of depth to that anyway. It's hard to know exactly why you do the things that you do. What I do know is that I got an urge to start making music. I was DJing in nightclubs because we were throwing the parties and I was doing the branding for them, and that was probably the biggest encapsulation of every sort of creative side of me. And I never wanted to be a promoter. I never, ever wanted to be a promoter, and I never even sort of went down that avenue of being interested in that. Yeah. We very much through parties wanted to create social environments and have fun and be free to express ourselves, whether that was a branding, from a branding perspective of creating a new brand and then creating the event and all those sorts of things, and then playing music and curating the music and deciding on that sort of stuff. That when I was doing that, and it was going very well, we accidentally did it for 10 years, and it brought in a very, very good income. So it meant that my graphic design, I didn't need to do design for money. I needed to brand the things that we were doing, but I was also fully aware that this nightclub pop culture, being in your 20s, was going to end, and I was going to need a career after that, and I wasn't an idiot. So I was like, I'm going to continue to design throughout this, but it just meant that I could do the jobs that I wanted to do. So I could do like Street X, the clothing label. I started the label with Bradshaw. He had the store. We did the branding. I was with him for 5 odd years, and he's amazingly successful and has taken it to great places. I could afford to do that with my friend for next to no money, especially in the beginning, because I wasn't relying on that as an income. And then I was doing the jobs that I wanted to do. So my design career just became great jobs with great people. doing Origin Fields or doing all of their branding and things like that. It was stuff that I could do, and I didn't need to take on smaller jobs to pay the bills.
Right.
And while I was doing that, I found that I had this urge to make music. And what it was I felt like I was getting a little bit burnt out on design.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting a little bit burnt out on, I think, maybe finding it a little bit easy because I wasn't challenging myself very hard. Even though I was doing jobs that were great and jobs that were fun. They were things with friends. They were having massive cultural relevance, like we're going on Hype Beast, or obviously Origin's a massive music festival, various other things. But I think that there was a part of my sort of creative, just try not to sound too wanky, but there was some sort of like creative soul or urge where I was like, I need to do something here.
Like fulfill like this need to do music and
and it happened to be music, and I was playing with that, and it was an avenue. And I think I had always wanted to get back into music because as much as I was DJing other people's music, I did not think of that as a thing.
Were you always creative throughout that, like say, growing up in school and college and university, like where do you always have that creative mindset or angle to whatever you did, or was it something you kind of stumbled upon through your 20s while you were looking for design and you happened to know Photoshop kind of thing?
Nah, it's definitely it's an interesting thing. I spoke to my girlfriend about this a few years ago, and it was one of those, you have those conversations, just you don't know when they're going to come, but you'll have a conversation and you're like, that changes the way that I think about things. And she was saying about that she studied neuroscience, and she's really intelligent girl, and she was telling me we were just kind of discussing the creative mind, and she said to me, the creative mind isn't like the way that you see the world and being creative. That's not a choice. It's a different type of mind. So some people are very pragmatic. Some people are very pros and cons and things like that. Whereas creative people, maybe as a whole, maybe not, but certainly in my sense, like I see problems and I see life in a certain way, and that's the creative thing.
So you think that's inherent to certain people as opposed to others who don't have that creative brain?
I don't know, because I'd always assumed that everyone was the same as me. But I'm also, like, I've got the attention deficit disorder, so I was not diagnosed till later in life, but my brother had it from a young age. So I'm aware that my mind is a bit of a nightmare sometimes, and it's very chaotic. And I think that I've been forced to be the way that I am, like the route that I've taken to get to where I am, like working for myself and doing all of these things in like a DIY or an independent way. A lot of that stems from not being able to be organized enough to be working for someone else, not wanting to be put in those sort of confines, which I think a lot of people can adapt to those things quite easily. Whereas I work a job where I can and I will stay up tonight probably till 2 o'clock in the morning to finish a deadline to get something out, and then tomorrow I'll probably sleep till 10 or 11 a.m. and go to the gym in the middle of the day, and then maybe start work again and just wait to see when the creativity hits you.
It's almost like you seek refuge in creativity because of the way your mind works.
I think so.
And not necessarily you have a creative mind and that's why you do what you do. Or we don't know per se. But
that's how I feel. Yeah. That's how I feel about myself, so I think.
With your, like, with this lifestyle, do you ever feel that you need, like, do you enjoy this lifestyle, first of all? Like, in terms of, say, some people, for example, they want to get up at 5 and they want to start working at 6 and they'll go to bed by 8 and 9 and that's like anything other than that, though, they don't enjoy, right? Whereas people like, you and even me to an extent, where we don't have a certain, routine per se. I know for me, for example, is when I don't have any routine at all, like, okay, I'll go to bed at 2 and then get up at 8 or something. But then if that starts getting loosened out, I'll actually start feeling not unproductive, but I won't enjoy the process as much, because I'll feel that every day is different, right? Like there's no anchor that's holding me down towards a certain path, even though I enjoy that flexibility. I'm just curious to know, do you feel the same with, because you sound like my routine in term, like I do exactly that. Like I go to bed at 2 or 3, get up at 8, 9, do my day-to-day stuff, go to gym in the middle of the day if I need to. And then I always thought creativity would come to me, like it needs to come to me. Like this is what I felt over my 20s. As I kind of embark into the 30s, I'm feeling more and more that it's something that you need to build your life around rather than it controlling your life.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same?
Man, curious. I definitely agree with what you're saying. I am I'm a bit of a contradiction in a lot of ways, because in that I try, like I go to work every day.
Yeah.
So I go to the studio every day. Some days it just doesn't work. Some days it just does not work at all. Like some days my brain will not be working at all, and then other days it will work, but I need to show up every day. So I need to show up every day to make sure that I'm there. And I've got deadlines and I always make my deadlines, even if it's means pulling an all-nighter.
Yeah.
I feel like the creativity that I have, or that spark, I need to be around when it shows up. And I do my absolute best to create environments where it can be able to flourish. But at the same time, and the same as you, like I think in a lot of ways, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm doing a lot of writing lately about, because when I come together and I do something, say I write a song, or say I do a big branding job, or I design something. As far as I'm concerned, I sit there and then something crazy happens, and then I have a song.
Yeah.
But that's bullshit. It's just total bullshit. But like I believe that.
Yeah.
So I hired someone recently to start working for me in the design studio.
Sure.
And I thought, I'm going to have to tell this person how to do the things that I'm doing. Otherwise, I'm just like, oh, you just sit around and wait for it. So I started to reverse engineer these things, and it occurred to me that I have a very, very, very detailed process, but I just know it so well. It's like explaining to someone how you tie your shoes. You just tie your shoes. But if you need to go through the step-by-step of what tying your shoes is, you realize that you're just doing something you've done so many times that it's become grouped in the back of your mind, and you're kind of constantly problem-solving, fact-checking, doing all this stuff, looking for references, thinking about what works, melody, stuff like that. That's just become so ingrained in you that creativity is kind of a package. It's kind of a package of those thoughts. So when you really sit down and try and break it down and reverse engineer it, you realize that there's actually a method to it.
Yeah.
And for me, and I know for a lot of creative people, and I don't know if this resonates with you, it's easy, as you said, to be loose is a little bit chaotic. And there's a lot of negative self-talk that comes with that, because you're like, why aren't I getting up in the morning? Why aren't I like everyone else?
Yeah.
But the reality is you don't want to be like everyone else. Because if you wanted to be like everyone else, you could be. It's the easiest thing in the world. You can just go and do it. You can just go and get a job. You can get a job at a marketing company. You can go there at 9 a.m. You can sit in on boardroom meetings. You can do that. Like, that's, we live in Perth. Like, it's actually pretty available to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So a big problem that I had was that I was getting all this negative self-talk of going, like, I'm getting older. I'm still not getting up early in the morning. I don't eat healthy enough. I go to bed later than everyone else. I do this and that. But then it's been pointed out to me by my girlfriend and by other people. They're like, yeah, but you do this, 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 and this. And the reality is that I do this way of life because it works for me. And I think if you remove the benefits or the feelings or the confidence that you get from hiding yourself away and creating something and then coming out and going, here you are, and people going, congratulations.
Yeah.
That's the kind of goal for me, I think, is is in everything that I do is very much doing it, not even handing it to someone and getting praised for it. It's doing it and knowing it. When you've done something that you consider great or that you consider awesome, there's no feeling like that. There's no feeling like going, like finishing that. You know, the video you did for your daughter, like finishing that before you
press publish,
before you do anything, you have that moment and you're like, this is good.
Yes.
And it's not just good, it's me. It's there. And that's the
thrill you chase as a creative.
Yeah. And I think that's more, I've spoke to people about this before, and that's more than money. So people are like, what drives you as a creative, or what drives you as a person? A lot of people are like, oh, I want security and I want this and that. And I'm like, I'm probably going to be fine security wise, but I got a laptop. I can probably, I've got enough of a skill set to make money, but I couldn't tell you how much money I want to make. And I couldn't tell you how much money you would have to pay me for me to be able to give up certain freedoms that I have as myself now. So I think I'm...
And you can't put a price on that feeling that you just mentioned. It's again, for me, like it's chasing that thrill of pressing publish, and then for me, and I know like social media has kind of really diluted the whole idea of viewership and consumption and things like that. But at the same time, I really enjoy feedback that actually comes from the community. So that also, drives me that, okay, like I've made something that others want to see or others actually appreciate. And it's not just, a like button, but it's more like people sending me a message saying, yo, that was really nice. Or someone just saying, oh, I was going through a bad day and that changed, that made me feel good. And those little things is what, you can't put a price on that. Like
I agree. And it's an interesting thing because in music, it's very algorithmic. So when I started putting out music, there was kind of a liberation at the time. It was like a SoundCloud thing, and blogs were writing about music that was on SoundCloud. That stuff was going out into a worldwide community, and then it would get played in nightclubs. There was a good DJ culture. There was things like that. And that's where I started, and it just went straight up. It just went straight to the top. So there was a thing called Hype Machine, which was it's still around now, but it's like a blog aggregator, and it used to just pick up what major blogs were talking about, what songs, and then it would play the songs from those posts. Oh, wow. And it was like a voting system. And I'd been on that when I was DJing for years and years and years. And I had 2 songs go to number 1 on that, which was completely unheard of for me. It was with the weirdest thing ever. And, like a lot of attention from, I went to America, I was having meetings with labels and things like that, and interviews on various different platforms and stuff like that. Very, very cool. Then you go away and you work on more music, you do bits and pieces. And then over a short period of time, everything switched to Spotify. Mm-hmm. It's just a totally different thing. And it comes down to like playlist curation and... So,
because you've been on SoundCloud, like you started your journey on SoundCloud.
The whole thing on SoundCloud, yeah.
And obviously now Spotify is number 1. Like, let's face it, it's the place to be for a musician and a consumer. How has... Like, what are the differences for you as a musician for being on both, and which one do you prefer, like, for making a music career per se?
I have no idea how anyone would make a music career right now. I have absolutely no idea.
Right.
And that's not to discourage anyone. More so, probably, I've aged out of the place where you can... I think if you were coming in now at like in your early 20s and you had a very good grasp and understanding on like multiple platforms like TikTok and everything, and you had an understanding of the same understanding I had of the world when I was 21, and you grow up with this technology, or you grow up in this culture. I am very aware that I'm like in my late 30s now, so I just care about the things that I care about, and I'm still involved in certain elements of like what you would consider kind of youth culture, but I'm not kidding myself.
Yep.
You know what I mean? There's a time where the world starts changing and you're like, oh, I have no idea what that means. You know what I mean? Yep. So like the idea of people miming and dancing to their mobile phones is just like, it's not something I'm going to pick up. You know what I mean?
It's what our, like I guess we do have a generation gap, but it's like what the old generation thought of MySpace when MySpace
Oh man,
came
absolutely,
out.
absolutely. And I will never hate on it because it's just the first time, which is quite an interesting thing. It's the first time you notice.
Yeah.
Like when TikTok comes out and you don't download the app.
Yeah.
And you realize that you stop. Because you were MySpace, Facebook,
yes,
Instagram.
And you just keep on going.
Yeah, and you're like,
all
the new
platforms.
thing, the new thing. And then you're like, I don't need this one because it's not for me. And then suddenly there's more and more and more, which is great. And that means that, the stuff that's being created now and the way that people are creating and the things that people are doing are incredible. And the basis of creativity is taking what you have and doing what you can with it. It's not knowing everything. It's going, okay, like think about music. It's having a computer or having a guitar or having whatever it is that you have and doing whatever you can with that to express yourself. And that's what people respond to. So that's the beauty of any sort of creativity. And then the platforms are just going to come and go. The platforms have just been changing forever. It's like, whether it's when like vinyl and then CDs and then streaming and all that sort of stuff. But right now, when I came through on the SoundCloud thing, it was awesome because it was very liberated and people would just, SoundCloud was free. You could put whatever you wanted on there. People could listen to it. People could talk about it. No one was getting paid at all. So it was like I had millions of plays on songs and never got paid for any of it. That was totally fine because the idea was that you would then tour or you would just even, it's like you're putting something out and people are liking it.
And it's like, it's such a confusing state to be not just a musician, but a creator. But yeah, let's talk about being a musician, because if you look back beyond, before MySpace, before SoundCloud, before any of the social media ecosystem for a musician, prior to that, it was you form a band, you go out and you play in bars, and you start, you have enough money to get a studio booked. Get a demo, start sending in, if it's good enough, you start playing it live again, you see more people buying some of those demos physically off of you on the shows, you start sending it out to labels with the hope that somebody picks it up, radio stations. And essentially, but if you look at that system, that process, like the amount of work compared to the amount of work you do now, I think the amount of work that is still the same, but the type of work you do has changed, because now you got to think like, oh, I am my own media person as a musician. I have to put out not just my music online, but how I appear on the cover, or who is it going to, like what audience demographic I'm thinking of, what platform should I choose, how do I advertise this, how do I build a community around it. So you're kind of taking a step back and doing all the stuff as well. But there's also that whole concept that it has never been easier to become a musician and reach as many people as possible either. So you go like, you've got those best of all worlds, but the worst of it as well at the same time.
There's less barriers for entry, but less barriers of entry means more people.
Exactly.
But that doesn't matter, because if you there's no rules as to what's good. So self-expression is just self-expression. Like all these people that came up and did something new or did something different or just just did something. People responded to it because it made sense to them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether that's remixing songs or whether that's making like non-vocal based dance music, or whether it's being a rapper, or whatever it is, someone did that for no reason. They just did it for their own self-gratification, and then they put it out. And that's how it happened. So someone did it, no one had heard it, and then they packaged it, they put it out. And that's the way that you can do things now. And you couldn't do that before because you needed to go through like distribution and label.
Having that ability to self-express has definitely gotten easier, because you just can express yourself in so many different forms of, creative outlets. But to make it into a career, I think that's where the distinction and the difference starts piling on, because you can be expressing yourself through a video, through a dance number, or through whatever, but then turning that into a sustainable career is, I think, what most people struggle with, because there is a you can still make music without. I think you're talking about it on the Grim Reaper podcast as well. This is sometimes you just want to take up a guitar and play Jimi Hendrix and just feel like I don't need to put it anywhere else. I don't need to. Just me expressing myself, me itching that creative scratch.
That's the hardest thing, man, because the hardest thing is that everything, and I know this is a bit of like a buzz topic at the moment, but everything is like a side hustle, right? So every hobby that anyone has now is like, oh, how are you going to make money out of that? How are you going to do this and that? And this is the thing that's hard with music, is that when you start creating music, and the way that I'm talking about it, when you start doing it, you're doing it as a form of self-expression. Or I was doing it as a form of self-expression. But then when it got popular, it was about trying to reverse engineer the success of the stuff that was done in the beginning, and that's incredibly stifling. To start from a point of going, I want a music career, and trying to navigate that, I don't know, because first of all, there's never been money in music. There has never been money in music. There's never been money in music for the musician. For the very, 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 very top echelons, by all means. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that it's a fruitless venture. Like, you can still have a good life and you can do great things. And there's a million ways to get paid along the way. But I think that what happened, what I believe is that when the SoundCloud thing happened, and it was about a 4-year period, when that happened, music was liberated. There was a platform that many, 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 many people were on. And that platform was being championed, and people were just free to go. It was basically the Facebook of music. It was just like, you had an account, you put your stuff up, you could curate your own stuff. The community was overwhelmingly positive. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. I was so surprised.
Yeah, I remember the days.
Yeah, totally. It was crazy. And the problem was that people started getting really popular on there, and then they pivoted to, how do I make a career out of this? And that's when like a lot of people were getting signed. I got signed. Everyone got signed. Yeah. The thing that happened was that everything shifted over to Spotify, because all of the they made it so that they were paying artists, obviously, but then it was also the fact that
for consumer, Spotify, like if I'm not a musician, I'm just a listener, Spotify is fantastic. I pay $10 a month, get all the music, anything. It curates stuff for me.
Yep.
It's so easy to use. So I think for the consumer, it was a game changer, and I think that's why people started listening to it more than, because SoundCloud was actually for musicians by musicians kind of thing.
Definitely.
Where Spotify is like, it's a product for the mass. If you're a musician who wants access to the mass, you come and join us, kind of thing.
I know, but this is where it's disappointing, because what you just described is a department store.
It is.
Now, if you wanted to, and everyone was like, I want everything in one place. Where does that think about the best things that happened when you were young. Think about the things that you got involved in, the things that you care about, the things that shaped you as a person. So, finding the clothes that they didn't sell at Myer or that they didn't sell in big department stores, and finding those like boutique places where people were traveling to go and buy Supreme, or they were going, things that had an influence on your life. Finding music, going on, like, for me it was like internet, where it was going on blogs and finding different artists that I'd never heard of, and then eventually them going through to the mainstream. Like, I remember when I listened to Drake's first mixtape, and I was just banging. It was like 2012, and I was just listening to it all the time, and I was like, this is amazing. And then obviously finds its way into, it was already popular on like Tumblr and things like that, but it wasn't in the mainstream. And then it gets to the mainstream and you're like, okay, that's cool, but now it's being made. Now it's pivoted that way.
This is where it gets so, it's like frustratingly confusing, because as an artist, if you want to, like, and this is something I spoke with Matsu as well, is that, are an artist if there's no one else to view your art, right? If it's only for yourself, then it's not really, it could be art, but you're only doing it for yourself. So it's more like self-expressing, self-gratification, whatever.
The true artist, right?
Yeah, but then at the same time, if you want to be, like, you want to connect to people with your art, which most musicians, or not most, but most people want to do, in terms of, say, okay, I've produced something, I've created something, someone else is connecting to or resonating with my, I think that's, again, a different feeling that's unmatched. Yep. And then when you want to multiply, then that's when it becomes mainstream, right?
Yep.
So in theory, isn't it great that I can connect to everyone in the world, but at the same time, it's, like you said, stifling, because now I have to make it a career out of it.
Yeah.
And then now I have to satisfy these numbers. Okay, I've connected with 100 people. Next time I have to do 150 to keep this contract that I have.
Yeah.
And that's where you start. And I think that's where it gets really, really, it bogs you down as a creator.
Well, I think people are commodified now. I think that if you want to be, I don't think being a musician is what making music is about as much in the current sphere right now. And that's not to hate on it at all. I feel like everyone has a platform to be commodify themselves as a personality. I know that people that now, like, the number one job that people want is to be a YouTuber, which is a job I had never heard of when I was even when YouTube first started, obviously. Of course. But what you have now is you have people before you could sing or you could play guitar or you could do whatever, and you would make music and people would be like, oh, that's great, and that resonates with me and I'm going to come. Now people want to resonate with you as a person on top of what it is that you're doing. So there is a lot of, like, great music out there that I will listen to, but there's a lot of stuff that I will follow because it's more three-dimensional and it's more interesting and it's more entertaining. And I think that's where a lot of people fall off. And I certainly fall off. I think it really does speak to what you said before. It's like you need to be all in. And we spoke about this at the very beginning. You were like, who are you?
Yeah.
And what are you defined as? And I feel like now it's like you're going to be all post bulletin, like it's like I am this and this is what I do, and I'm vlogging my life, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I feel like that is very much a thing that's happening right now, and I think that there's going to be a mass rejection of that, and that's going to bring about the next big moment in pop culture. The same way that
would be, do you think?
I don't know, but I don't think it's going to be like people turning off their phones. I don't think it's going to be. Right. I think it's just going to be a slight shift, and you never know what it's going to be. But I mean, punk music came out of a mass saturation of like cheesy rock music, like Yes and The Who and things like that, right? Yeah. So And then that had such a major impact on the world as we know it now, and especially on pop culture. So there's always going to be a mass rejection of anything that happens.
But it's funny because then what happened was pop punk became what it was rejecting in the first place.
Totally.
And it just becomes a cycle.
Yeah, it's the snake eating its own tail.
And it's like an inherent, like it almost feels like the humans have an inherent need to push something beyond the envelope to the point where it becomes its own enemy. Not enemy per se, but it does become bigger than what it intended to be. And I think it's the same for like YouTubers, right? You mentioned that that's the number one jobs that a lot of kids want these days. I think it all goes down to humans inherently wanting status roles. And it's the same thing with musicians, right? Like when you said there's been no money for musicians, I don't think that's entirely true, in the sense that if you really wanted to make money, you can go and play at a bar, you can go and play at weddings, you can go do commercials, you can go, like there's actually even more now, infinite way. You can literally make stock music every day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And put it on stock websites,
yep.
right? So there is way to make money as a musician.
Yeah.
But what we are after are status roles as musicians and as creators. And I think,
and then you want that as a career as well.
Exactly. And I think, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, I just think that's an inherent way of how people think. And I think that's where we're struggling to find like a balance that, okay, I want to be a creator, I want to make money, but I don't want to sell myself. But it's like everybody wants all of the best at once, you know. But I just don't think the world's kind of set up like that. And I think that's why a lot of the creators are suffering in the pursuit of status roles.
Well, I think it's a new frontier to some degree. And I'm jealous, I'm jealous of people that are growing up now, because a lot of people are like, oh, I wouldn't want to grow up now. I'm jealous of people that are in their sort of teenage years now, because I think my generation and a lot of the people that I kind of grew up with, self-promotion was an awkward thing, especially in Australia. It's like, I don't think it's the same. I was in America for a little while, and it doesn't seem to be as much there. But we've always had that like tall poppy syndrome thing here.
Yeah.
So self-promotion was like, you would kind of begrudgingly do well at something, and everyone wanted to be like, but you're just the normal guy. You don't really... You
don't want to brag too much.
Yeah, and you can't really speak up about the things that you're doing. Arrogant. Whereas I see kids now, and they're like talking into their cameras, they're doing all this stuff, and it's skills that... It's a level of self-awareness or a lack of self-awareness. I don't know, but it's like...
It's a level of confidence.
It's a level of confidence, totally. And I feel like that confidence... it's obviously bad for some people, because if you have a lack of confidence, that might be amplified. But just think a moment for the people that do have that confidence and the avenues that it opens up for them.
It's the perfect time to be around.
That's it. And you're always going to have strong people and weak people, and I think you're going to have strong people that take this and run with it and change the way that we view the world. And I think that's what's happened, even to the point now where you're watching like YouTubers boxing and things like that. You don't have to like it, but it has changed the way
absolutely
that you view the world for positive or negative. So people are going to take the tech, not just the technology, they're just going to take the cultural moment that we have, and they're going to be in their early 20s or late teens, and they're going to run with the ball and do something crazy. And I think that's exciting. I'm not negative on all of this stuff at all. I just know that I don't like Spotify. I'm on Spotify. I'm doing the Spotify thing. It's a very, 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 very weird thing. Like when you are on a label and you get put on a Spotify playlist, they ask you to thank Spotify publicly they're like, oh, you better,
Someone's pleasing the overlord.
Yeah, but it's like you're the ones putting the music on. Like it's weird and it's very closed off, and there's a lot of like handshakes and it's very strange. It feels like it's just like the music industry's way to grab back, like to be able to hold people down again. Unfortunately, it's not like a major source of income for me. It's something that I'm doing out of enjoyment and out of self-expression, and I hope that I can continue to do that.
And again, like I don't produce music, but then again, when I look as a consumer, I think that's where they have the guts to do these things like this, because as a consumer, Spotify's made my life so much easier to find new music, and I think the way they kind of package it, and I don't know if there's any other way to do it, is you build something like Spotify is basically, if you understand, you run a company and stuff, so you know the whole marketing of lead generation and how kind of things bucket down, right? So with Spotify, it's almost like lead generation for musicians. Like, this is my first step into finding more people, and hopefully they'll follow me in my journey to a concert that I might do, or to a show that, or buy my merch that I might sell, and that would be my main source of income, and not Spotify. And I think that's what they've played it as, and that's how it's working. And I don't know if there's actually any other way to do this, because they won't sustain if they start paying musicians full time.
Oh yeah, no, I agree, but I think that if you look into the ways that musicians are being paid, and you look into ways that they're trying to switch it now, where you can pay, you can sign on to get a lesser amount of money from Spotify.
Yeah, to be on a more curated playlist or something. Yeah.
What the fuck is that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's crazy. So it is not. I think what we're talking about, we're talking about the same thing, but from different angles. Like, if you think about connection, like, to me, music is, I keep referring to music as self-expression. So music is self-expression on a base level, right? And then you're packaging it in whatever way that you're packaging it, and then you're putting it out there. Now, that's where people have an opportunity to hear your pain or your joy or whatever it is, and connect with it. And that's it's kind of what matters, right? Like, when you said, like, you put out a video and, like, it's people watch it and then they go, that made a difference to me, it did that. It's not always about hearing that. It's just the fact that happens. Like, think about all the people that watched it that it affected that didn't message you. What's happening now is that in order to get playlisted and to get on algorithms and things like that, this isn't always the way, because great music and good, like, if it's good, it's going to be fine. But a lot of people haven't got the opportunity to be good yet. They've got the opportunity to know what they're doing, and then they're modifying themselves and doing the music that they want, that they think is going to go on these playlists, and it's becoming pretty fucking soulless. Like, it's becoming... Hasn't it always been the case, though? Like, if you look at record labels and stuff like that, definitely.
Like, the reason why we have 3-minute songs is because radios wouldn't be able to play longer numbers. And I think you're right in the sense that, you know, like, for example, Bohemian Rhapsody still made it past all the numbers and stuff like that, despite not being 3-minute and following a formula. But because of that 3-minute formula, we have what's, you know, the whole average understanding of I have to make a song so that it fits on a radio show. Yeah,
so it's formatted in that way.
Exactly. So my point being is that for any mass media consumption, has it not always been the case? So would Spotify then be like, you know, we're just doing what was always out there kind of thing? And
I totally agree with that.
But it's just becoming more and more soulless from
I just feel like that what we're talking about there is more of a pop structured thing. So we were saying that radio predominantly playing pop records, right? So it's basically made everyone play on the one level playing field, and everyone try and compete with Drake and things like that. Whereas there's still, don't get me wrong, like, there's still a lot of music subculture, and that's important. And there's you know, Bandcamp, and there's NTS radio. There's like a bunch of things that people are listening to. I know a lot of my friends that don't even have Spotify accounts. But I think from the point of being in a place where you could be direct to consumer, and it felt like it was a pretty fair trade-off, no one was getting paid and everything was good, to going to a place where it's starting to feel very pay for play. And it makes it in. It's a strange place.
It changes,
and then
it
and
changes
also
your
the money,
output.
like the money. The money side of it it's pretty insane.
It's weird because it's the same thing with YouTube, for example. Like the reason why we started seeing more long form videos is because if you made a video that's less than 10 minutes, as a creator you'd be getting less money because YouTube has less of an opportunity to show ads. So what creators started doing is making videos that's 10 minutes long, even if it didn't need to be 10 minutes long.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's just how it's I think we can go into a very tech-based
man, absolutely. But the thing
rant.
is as well, that's changing all the time.
Everything. It's changing.
This stuff
everything.
is changing all the time. So like
even TikTok, like they didn't have 3-minute videos until last month. Prior to that, it was just, I don't know, 66 seconds, 30 seconds. But now they've added 3 minutes, which means a lot of TikTokers are like, you know what, I'm gonna start making because that's what TikTok's pushing now.
Yeah. It's interesting, man, because I work with a couple of people that work in that sort of digital marketing space, and it gets pretty insane. Like the way that you need to really be on top of
what's changing.
Like I constantly hear in the studio, it's like Facebook likes it if you do this, or Instagram now wants you to do reels, right?
Yeah.
Like they're like, we need
they're
you to do
competing
reels.
TikToks,
So you get more views.
Yeah.
They'll push your reels to more people than with other things. And I'm like, it's just one of those things where I'm like, man, this is crazy.
Because back in the days of early social media, it wasn't like that. It was like, if you create something, you know for a fact that most people would start seeing it. It's right. I'll actually divert the conversation from music to design. So obviously you do a lot of design, and you've got your own studio. You've got your own, you direct a lot of art campaigns and branding, things like that. What is good design?
Good design is kind of minimal for me. It's doing the most with the least. I always say to people, you're trying to convey a mood. You're trying to convey a feeling. So being able to do that as clearly as possible, it's really quite a hard thing to do, especially when you're doing client work, because you're trying to figure out what they are trying to do, and you're trying to take that and make it into a feeling. Essentially, you're trying to make it into an actual, almost an emotion, and then convey that in a clever way. So I think good design doesn't try to do more than that.
Right. With of course, with your three, I would say, identities that you have, like, being a musician on the side and working as a designer and directing art and running a studio, which in itself, I think, requires a lot of things that's beyond creative, like setting up deadlines, talking to clients. Unless you've got a team, you kind of have to talk to clients and manage their accounts and sort of bills.
You just do everything yourself.
You just do everything, especially when you're working for yourself. So I think from your perspective, how should a creative person like yourself, or whoever's listening, kind of tackle these different identities as independently, or how do you do that yourself? Like, do you function your brain in certain categories? Do you wake up and be like, these few hours I'm going to do this, those few hours I'm going to do this, or is it? How do you exist with these identities at the same?
I exist in pure chaos. I'll be the first. I wish I didn't. I don't have a lot of responsibilities.
Right.
So I don't have any kids. I'm not married. I have a long-term girlfriend, but she's very understanding of who I am. So I'm constantly trying to figure that out a little bit more. I spend time. Design I do because I love it. I actually really genuinely love it. But I also do that because I need to pay bills and I need to do stuff like that. Fortunately, I'm in a pretty blessed position where I get paid very well for what I do. So I can, and I enjoy the jobs that I do. Mm-hmm. So it's very rare that I'll do something which I don't enjoy, because if I do that, it takes me a lot longer anyway. So the busier and busier and busier that I've got over the last few years, where things have sort of 10x'd in the idea of like what we're being paid and the scale of things that we're doing. Design takes the majority of the time. I've got music studio in the design studio.
Wow.
I've got Dream Studio. Absolutely love it. It's in the middle of the city. It's beautiful. I've got good friends in there with me, all doing various different things. And then I work on music when I can. I think early on I was working on music more because it was more of a viable option, and it was something that I was sort of looking into doing career-wise. But when the two were sort of competing, I was like, I really enjoy design. I know it very well. I know that there's a lot of longevity in it, and I can continue doing music in whatever form it comes out in. You know, like I was saying before, like about playing music is just playing music and not recording it is awesome. Putting music out, I put some music out the other month, a track called Wait, and putting that out was fantastic, and I love doing it. And I'm going to continue doing that, but not with the same deadlines.
Or the intention or that you do with the design.
With the design, yeah.
I forgot to clap, so. There's a clap for how good your answer was as well. With your studio as well, you've done some pretty cool stuff. So you've worked with or you've done design for, I've seen Cardi B stuff on your website. And recently you've worked with Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine. So what's it, first of all, like working with big brands, out of the studio based in Perth, which, let's face it, not a lot of people around the world knows as the hub of Australian design community. So what's it like working with big brands, first of all? And then, I just want to dive deeper into what's it like working with, like Tom Morello himself. Like, how's he as a dude, and what was the whole process like doing his album cover?
It's interesting. I think the longer that I am in this sort of in this game, and the more that I do and I suppose achieve, the more you realize that it's all just people. Like, you're only ever dealing with a person. You can sit there and be like, I look at some of the jobs that I've done in the last 5 years, and I will go, 10 years ago I would have been like, oh my, how is that? How would that ever be possible? But the reality is that you're just working with people. I'm a relatively independent. I've got one person working for me, and I've had other people work for me in the past. I run Studio Thinktank, but for the most part, it's just me. People will... The interesting one that I had initially was Sony. So Sony in the UK.
Wow.
And this is a probably important thing for people that are listening. I didn't have an Instagram, I don't think, until 2 years ago for the design studio, because I was just doing work for people, and I had a good number of clients, and I would get more clients, and I've never really done much marketing as far as the design stuff goes. I probably should, but I've always been busy. I've always had good work. And I was fortunate enough, I was doing some work for StreetX, which I'd done for ages, and I just did like a cool little type treatment thing for a GI that they were releasing. So it was like a STX comp thing, and I just put that on the Instagram, and I thought, I'll hashtag, right? Because I just never bloody hashtag, because I never have time. I never have time to do anything. So I was like, cool. So I hashtagged that stuff. It is whatever it was. Never really bothered looking at it. Kept it moving, and you'd see that there would be likes and things like that. But I genuinely don't. It's not like, I think with the Loston Instagram, like I'll put something up and then you check like everyone, how many likes it's got. With the studio stuff, I'm just like, it's up there, it's cool. Because I kind of have supreme confidence in that stuff, because like I said before, like you already know you're already happy with it before it goes out. I ended up getting hit up by Sony UK asking me to do some branding work for an artist called Labrinth. And I was like, okay, no problem.
Huge in UK, yeah.
Huge.
Massive.
I didn't know that I knew who he was.
Yeah.
But I did. I like knew some of his songs and everything.
Yeah.
So I got hit up not by Sony. I got hit up by the creative director one of the creative directors at Sony from his personal account on Instagram.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh yeah, cool. It sent through like a bunch of references, and I was like, I can probably do this. I just played around with it and did it. And then I checked, I think halfway through doing it, because I was doing it as if it was like someone from Ocean Reef, and which was super beneficial. So then I looked at the guy, and he's like, you're talking like hundreds of millions of plays on
wow.
things, and it's just like a massive, massive star. And I was like, well, that's more intimidating now, right? But the work's going to be the same. So I sent the work back to them, and they're like, we love it. We want to buy it. And then I ended up working on that entire campaign and doing the album artwork and doing all of that. Now, that's a massive, massive, massive company. That was an imprint of Sony called Psycho, which is Simon Cowell's imprint.
Wow.
And they own all of the Got Talents and everything as well.
Of course, yeah.
But I was just working with a creative director there. And then I went to London. I was going over to Italy for a wedding, so I went to London and I dropped in on their offices and had a meeting. And it's full of cool young people, and they like what I do. And I was like, got along with them well. So all of that work, which was that went on like, you know, the Euphoria, the TV show, like,
wow.
It was used on that, like the branding, he did the Euphoria. He did soundtrack the whole thing. So the album cover for Euphoria was like had my work on it, and like then bunch of stuff on the BBC, you know, London Underground billboards, everything, like music videos. It was crazy, and it was crazy being in London and seeing it, just incidentally at the same time. That whole job was done via WhatsApp. The whole job. So every single part of that, except for invoicing, was done via WhatsApp. So it was me designing things and then screenshotting them and sending them via my phone, sending them via my desktop app of WhatsApp to them and going back and forward. Now, it's exactly the same. So dealing with Tom Morello, Bloody Beetroots, all of these things, it's all the same, because at the end of the day, the work that you do, it doesn't matter how many eyes see it. If they like your style or they like the type of work that you do, you kind of create, and it ends up just being between you and another person. And then they go, okay, I'm now going to put that out. They're still going on the Instagram app and posting that, you know, like, or someone is. So you're not working for, it's not intimidating to work for bigger companies, and it's not a crazy process. I've done a couple of big corporate clients where it's like, there's a lot of bullshit. There's just like boardroom meetings and like all that sort of stuff. But it doesn't, when you're working, I mean, Tom Morello was a crazy one for me because it was like a massive Rage Against the Machine fan. And I'd just been watching his masterclass on the Masterclass app. So I'd been working with Bob from the Bloody Beetroots for about 2 years, which I linked up with him because I was doing Shock One's artwork, who's a good friend of mine. Yeah. He did a collab song with Bloody Beetroots. So Bloody Beetroots hit me up and said, what I like with that. And then I did all of their stuff. And then he's now done a collaborative project with Tom Morello. So he speaks to me through WhatsApp voice recordings rather than typing all the time. So just like talking to the thing. And he's got like he speaks really, really good English, but he's Italian. So he's got this like great Italian voice. And he's like, oh, I'm going to get, you know, I want you to do some work with this thing I've got for Tom Morello. I've shown him your stuff and he loves it. And you're like, that's insane. Like that's really insane. And then I emailed back and forth because there was a few labels, because it was a collaboration, there's a few labels involved. Right. And Tom was on that chain and we did talk directly to each other in that, but it wasn't as, I didn't get to like
Yeah.
We're not friends. I don't. I don't know.
But it's still pretty. It's just the power of. That's what I meant when I said the power of social media today is just insane. Like as a creator, like you've grown up listening to Rage's music, and now you're working with Tom Morello for stuff that he's doing, and it's just that how the gap's just reduced.
It's crazy. Yeah,
crazy.
I keep saying to everyone that we are in. I mean, anyone that's from Perth that's listening, it's the most isolated city in the world. Like, it's like the most standard thing anyone says, but it's not. Like it used to be. Like geographically, maybe.
Yeah.
But since the internet, with the level of like of access to the internet that we have, and the fact that we speak English and that we have, like, we just have the ability to connect, and our cultures are so similar to America. It just makes the world a much smaller place, and it makes the ability to do anything very easy.
Collaborate, like build stuff. It's insane what you can do. You've done a few work with other musicians as well, which is pretty cool. I think Taco is one who's been doing pretty cool stuff, and I think a song that you've with him. He's from Perth as well.
He is, yeah. We used to play basketball together, so it's funny because Reggie was like with that SoundCloud stuff, like he was like the biggest. Like he was massive.
He was back then. Yeah. And he's still pretty big in Spotify and stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. And he's insanely talented, and he's an absolutely lovely person. But the interesting thing with that was I was playing basketball. We had a pickup game, and it was like me, him, Justin, who does Howls, Carl Shockwan was there a bit. There's a whole bunch of really, really interesting, really successfully just talented people, right?
Just playing basketball.
And I was listening to Tark, who had just done the Retwork 2. And it was the first time I had like really liked some music that he'd done. Like I'd heard stuff before and I was like, that's sick, it's great. But it wasn't really in my avenue. And then I was like, that was like my favorite record. And I was like, oh shit, this is crazy. So I used to have to and I'd known him for quite a while. And you don't want to tell your friends that, it's just weird. But then it was around that time that I started making music. So I didn't tell them that I was making music at all, because this is like, these people are all like musicians. They're really big. Yeah. And I was just like, just shut up about it. So when I did put it out and it got known that it was me and stuff, they were super responsive. I ended up doing a song with Reggie, and we've done tons of work together.
Pretty good stuff, yeah.
Heaps of stuff, yeah. We did a Create and Explore thing. He started a thing called Create and Explore that was really cool, and I did the branding for that.
Oh wow.
But this is the same thing again. Like, this is just like, these are relatively organic things, but then they end up going out to the world. It's like
823 is quite big right now.
Man, 823 is massive,
huge.
And he does really, really great things. His studio is awesome.
It's all out of Perth, and that's what fascinates me. Like, again, especially from someone coming from Bangladesh who's not born and bred in Perth. When I moved here, it didn't. Like you mentioned, Perth was always kind of shoved aside. Like, it's like Sydney, Melbourne is the main place to go and be. But even through this podcast, as I kind of started learning about the creative scene, about the different, it's actually like buzzing. Like, there's little pockets of so many cool things happening. It's just knowing about them, really. Like, it's only a few years ago I found out like Tame Impala is from Perth, and I was like, holy crap! I've listened to this band for like years, and Kevin Parker's from Perth. Like, it just blew my mind. Right? It just blew my like Flume and Taku, and and just finding you guys. It's really, really cool, and I think I think there needs to be a way to really build this community even further. I think nobody understands how. I think it's very underrated. I think Perth's very underrated still.
It's a weird one, because I think you can meet so many people from here, whether they live here or not. You can meet a lot of people who have really successful, like they're actually really successful, and people are just like willing to work hard, and they're just good at what they do. But I think a lot of it is leaving, which is a relatively unpopular opinion, but I don't know. You don't need to leave for good, but you do need to see, like, seeing the world makes a big difference. So a lot of people I know, like a lot of people from here have gone away and spent time in America or Europe and kind of just America was a big one for me, because going over there and just seeing what you perceive as being like the center of the world, or what I perceived as being the center of the world, and being there and realizing that like your opinion was actually really valid there, and like your ideas were kind of celebrated. It was like a really, really it allowed you to come back here.
Yeah, especially as a creator, I think America is still number one. Like no matter what anyone says, I feel like New York's like the stuff that they have been producing in terms of not even just artwork, but a lot of avenues of just stuff. It's insane. And
it's interesting though, because you go there and you realize that, like we did this with Street X as well. Like I think from being from here, you kind of look at America and you look at Europe and you're like, we're not really competing. We're not really like on that
same wavelength.
Yeah. And then when you go there, you realize like it's exactly the same.
And that's what I mean. Like, because that perception, and I'm talking about like level playing, neutrals, for example, who might look at Australia and be like, and look at America and like, oh, America's creative, but Perth isn't. That's what I try to mean with that statement before, is that's where we need to kind of build this community to the point where, not to compete or anything, but more like we've got a presence of design and music and art and all this, even food, like like foods here is amazing. And the same thing back in Bangladesh is like there's a whole different communities of designers and musicians that's just coming up, but nobody knows about these things.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why I started the podcast was because of this, is to kind of pick up on those elements. But I will divert the topic again on something a bit more personal, and can choose to not talk about it further. But you just speak a lot about your relationship with your father, and you brought up your family quite a few times on the podcast, and I've seen that on your Instagram. How much of your parents or your family has had an impact on your creative
heaps career? Yeah, heaps. So my mum is super inspiring. I didn't realize this till recently, but she tended to create things. If she wanted to do something, she would like create something for it. So like she was really into musical theatre. She moved here knowing nobody except my dad. She moved here when she was like early 20s, 2 kids, moving from Manchester, England, where I was born, and then moving over here, and sort of had to make her own life. And she loved like musical theatre, so she started a musical theatre company, and then toured that down south and did all that sort of stuff. Like she was in the West Australian Symphony Orchestra chorus, singing, and she went and studied and started a career late, because she was a mother, and she ended up with 3 kids, and so she's done some really awesome things. And I never realized how much I do the same thing as her, because you don't realize, and then you're like,
until one day you go like, oh, that's
you're like, that's kind of like makes sense to the way that I've done things. So, and I think that's because you see those things and they become normal to you. So normal is achievable. And I think that's has been something really important that I sort of took from my mom. My dad, it's funny because I'm a bit mental. So my mom and my dad split up when I was 12, but my mom is like, my mom's like very creative, and my dad was like super pragmatic. Right. It's like a typical sort of Manchester man. like a little bit cynical, very, very funny. He's an awesome guy, but he loved playing blues guitar, and he loved like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and all sorts of music. And he was he was like a different guy in that respect. Like he wasn't, I don't think he would have considered himself super creative in the sense of the way that we all talk about things, but he was very creative in the way that he saw the world, you know, like, and he did really interesting things. You know, I envy, I mean, you've said yourself you moved from Bangladesh, like I envy people that do that anyway. And being past the age now that my dad was when him and mum moved here, and understanding what that meant, especially at the time, and there's no internet and there's no things like that, is like to move across the world where you can only really converse with people via phone calls and the written word, you know what I mean?
It has a different layer of appreciation for.
It definitely does. So it's interesting. Like I'm definitely a combination of my mum and my dad. I lost my dad to leukemia a couple of years ago, three years ago, which was super tough because he was just a fantastic guy. And like I said, like the way that he saw the world, and the things that mattered to him was pretty inspiring. Like I try and live up to that because he had a lot, you know, he was he was like a traveler, and he's someone that really liked to experience things, and he knew what he liked, and he was really proud of the life that he built and the sort of family that had been built from that, you know. So to see him check out at like 65, especially as someone that like never smoked a cigarette, or like he probably smoked a cigarette before, but like never smoked cigarettes, never drank, didn't eat white bread, you know what I mean? Like, and then to get leukemia at I think he got leukemia at like 60. He lasted 2 years basically.
Right. Well, thanks for sharing that. We're almost towards the end of the podcast. But in terms of you know, like your influences in music and design, who do you usually look up to on either side of things? If any.
I look up to lots. Like I think it's pretty easy these days because you can follow people like in the design sort of community. So you can follow people on Instagram and stuff like that. There's some people that I've always really appreciated. Like there's a guy called Scott Hanson, which is he used to design under the name ISO 50. And he actually stopped designing because he started making music under the name Tycho. You heard of Tycho?
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and they're like majorly popular now, and they make just awesome, chilled out like music. But he's a fantastic designer, and I used to follow his blog pretty intently. I'm probably more of a fan to get in the right headspace to like design and be creative. I've always noticed this my whole life, that especially if your job ends up being to be inspired all the time, like to create things for other people, you need to kind of find little tricks to get into that inspired headspace, because there's nothing worse than opening a computer and just looking at it.
Blank.
So there's like music and for me photography. So if I sit there and have and look at some really interesting photography, it kind of numbs me out a little bit into that frequency where I can sort of start to feel my way through design, which is what design is. It's like feeling your way through it. So there's a photographer called Boogie who is he's got a website called artku.com, and he's incredible. He does like really kind of grimy street photography in black and white all over the world, but his stuff is absolutely incredible.
Right.
Music-wise, though.
Music-wise, yeah.
Yeah, it varies a lot. What am I listening to right now? I'm listening to a guy called Vegan.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I've been listening to for like the last 2 days. Really, really good. Super weird beatsy stuff. I think he runs Frank Ocean's something or other, like his radio show or something.
Frank's great.
He's a guy from London. Man, Frank's fantastic.
Yeah, so good.
But yeah, man, like lots of people, you talked about Tame Impala and stuff like that before. Like, just one last thing on that. Like, I really think that there being platforms like this and there being people that everyone growing up here knows are from Perth.
Mm.
Like, imagine growing up knowing that Tame Impala are from Perth. Like, what Tame Impala are. Like, absolutely once in a lifetime sort of, once in a generation talent.
So true.
And like that, to grow up and be like, it's just be
This
like
guy,
growing up and going, like
Kevin's just walked by Fremantle, it's around their areas.
That must be very inspiring to people, because when I grew up here, it wasn't.
And that's what I mean, because people I don't think they understand the influence that it had on Kevin to be what he is, and I don't think it's talked about enough.
Yeah.
Because to be and grow out of Perth and to become that, and not just Kevin, it's just in so many other acts that we see around the world, from Perth. It's that should be inspiring, and I think that just needs to be more talked about.
And that's the point, right?
Yeah.
I think the more people are inspiring each other, the better it's going to be.
Absolutely. Goal in 5 years?
I don't have the capacity to think. I try to
articulate.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of things at the moment. I'm doing like
journals and stuff.
Yeah, and I do some therapy stuff, like because the losing dad and just trying to make sense of like this is grief counseling essentially. And and then that leads into just being counseling, which is really beneficial if anyone wants to do it. It's just talking about yourself for an hour a day for an hour a week is actually not a bad thing. But yeah, in there, like we were talking about earlier about like not having, if you don't have routine and things like that, I get really stressed and I'm like, oh man, I need like a 5-year plan and I need this and that. But from talking that out, it just seems like.
Has it helped though? Like, because counseling helps in terms of articulating your thoughts. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Because all the answers that you need, a lot of the answers that you need are inside.
Yeah.
They're inside your own head anyway. So all therapy is just someone talking to you. No one's asking you a question. No one's like, tell me about this. You just start talking and then you've given a place to be able to talk. It's similar to this, man. Like this is very, 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 very similar. And I back it completely because you just like, as you discuss things and as you talk about things
come out.
You understand them better, right?
Yeah, so
and when they're rattling around in your head, you don't understand them.
And it's funny because it's not just for you as well. For me, it's just a way of articulating a lot of what I feel about in questions, and then getting answers from someone else with a completely different perspective gives me clarity to understand my ways. It's you're right. I totally get what you mean. Finally, for someone who wants to walk the path of design or building their own studio or making music, what are 3 things from your experience, from your life, that you can kind of say that, okay, these are the 3 actionable steps that you should take immediately? It doesn't have to be 3. It could just be 1.
I think from a design point of view, controversially, I'd say copy. Like copy, find things you love and copy them. Don't copy them and then release them, but remake things and try and figure out why what you like works. Don't try and think about why you like something. So just be a fan. Like if you see something, it's very easy now because you can go on Arena or you go on
Behance.
On Pinterest or Behance, right? Like Arena is a really good one. It's like, look that up if you haven't got it, because it's like a more pure version of Pinterest. But if you go on there and you start looking through, and anyone that's got any creative flair or creative interest probably has a folder called design shit or something like that. Mine was called blog shit forever. And you're just saving things that you like there. You Tumblr was really good for it as well. And don't think about what it is that you like. No, don't think about why you like the things that you like. It's yours. It's just your folder. It's your thing. Just grab the stuff, put it there. And then if you're thinking about learning design, or you have an interest in learning design, the only thing you really need to learn about design is the tools required to make it. No one can tell you what is good design, and no one can tell you what is bad design. No one can tell you that. I never studied design at all. I've won awards. I've worked for clients that we spoke about. No one can tell you anything because it's not something really that people are teaching. It's more so look at the things that you like and develop a taste or develop an understanding for your taste and then figure out how to do it. And by figuring out how to do it, that's why I say like copy, grab those things, remake them, figure bits out, watch YouTube tutorials, do that stuff. Right. And you will get an inherent understanding of how what you like works.
Right. Beautiful. Well, Scott, this was a pleasure. Thanks for taking the time. And
hey,
doing
man,
this.
Thanks. I appreciate it. This is a very cool platform. And thanks heaps for having me on, man. We'll do it again at some point.
We'll end up with a fist bump and say, go United.
Absolutely. We didn't even talk about United.
No, man, because I can get into that rabbit hole and just never
We
get
should
out.
do a podcast just on United. I would do that from like 94 to like now.
We should.
I've got a lot to say.
Thanks, man.
Thanks,
Appreciate
brother.
it. Cheers.